That's the common denominator. And the other common denominator that I see when I meet with people is that they embody this idea and this notion that they are, in some sense, a seed ready to be planted somewhere. And why do I say this? Because it reminds me of the time when Jesus had told his disciples, when they were trying to get him to go somewhere else, but he had something else in mind. He had to remind everybody what he came to do. And he uses the example of a grain of wheat, essentially like a seed. And he says this: unless a single grain of wheat falls into the ground and dies, it will remain a single grain of wheat. But if it dies, can somebody say that with me? But if it dies, it will produce much fruit.
It will produce much fruit.
One of the things that I see about people who are growing and changing is that they die daily. That the process of spiritual transformation speaks to this notion of death. Unless a single grain of wheat dies, it will remain a single grain of wheat. But somehow if it dies, if the husk comes off, right? We know the whole process. If it germinates, it becomes more than what it was when it was buried into the ground. And it's this process of growth, it's this process of resurrection. So some of us are in a place where we might feel somewhat scattered. Now, if you tell me you feel scattered, we can definitely understand and be there with you, right? Because we all, once in a while, get tossed back and forth. But God doesn't want us to be scattered all year. Right? It's like God doesn't really want us to be the hot mess all the time. I'm just a hot mess, right? Well, you're growing a little something, even within the messiness of stuff. The spirituality is messy. And some of us have been planted and we found what? Some grounding. And it's in the form of commitments. I'm going to commit to praying a few days a week. I'm going to commit to meeting in community on Sundays. I'm going to commit to leadership, and that's great. But there's something else. There's this notion, it's this idea that once we're buried into the ground, once we've committed and once we've got grounded, that there is a God who causes the growth. And Paul said it well. Some plant, some water, but in the end, you and I are not the ones that grow ourselves. So when you're hearing about 3 steps to a better you, 3 steps and you will have this successful life, I will say that that is not the route of a cultivator. Because we know that cultivation takes tilling. It takes what? Working the ground. It takes time. It takes all the elements to be in place for us to to have the conditions for growth. And then we see that something supernatural happens. God begins to grow us in ways that we didn't think were possible. So what is maturity? What is growth? And maturity is basically this. It's living in the simplicity of God's truth. Knowing that the Christian story is like art. It's not a science all the time. It's not looking for the latest methodologies. It's not looking for the latest research on how to be the best Christian ever. It's about going through the growing pains. It's about going through the messiness of life. It's going through the failures. Can you say amen with me? It's not feeling God sometimes. Can you say yes with me? It's not all of those things. But it's about just really staying the course and allowing God to do something that you may not even see in yourselves, but somehow, some way, is recognized by the fruit that is around you. So I'll leave you with this verse as we continue. And this was Paul's pastoral prayer, if you will, for the church of Ephesus. He says, "For this reason I kneel before the Father, from whom his whole family in heaven and on earth derives its name. Pray that out of his glorious riches he may strengthen you with power through his Spirit in your inner being, so that Christ may dwell in your hearts through faith." And I pray that you, being rooted and established in love, may have power together with all the saints to grasp how wide and how long and high and how deep is the love of Christ. And to know this love, somebody say love with me, love, that surpasses knowledge, that you may be filled to the measure of all the fullness of God. Amen.
We continue with our art celebration. And our next theme is rooted. A meditation on what it means to be rooted in God. My last two, I think, volunteers stand and declare.
Watered and nurtured.
Matured and grown.
Oh, those are the last two. So I'm going to bring it home. It also means firm and grounded. It means facing towards the sun and facing towards the sun. So now, I get to read Isaiah's words and lose my composure. I delight greatly in the Lord. My soul rejoices in my God. For he has clothed me in garments of salvation and arrayed me in the robe of righteousness. For as the soil makes the sprout to come up, and a garden causes seeds to grow, so the sovereign Lord will make righteousness and praise